Hey y'all, so y'all know Netflix has the series Monsters. Well, today that's what my episode's going to be about. Monsters. So there are several monsters in history. You have Lizzie Borden, Ed Gein, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Jack the Ripper, the Starvation Doctor, the Menendez brothers, Charles Manson, the Zodiac Killer, the Boston Strangler, the New Bedford Highway Killer, the Green River Killer, the Hillside Strangler, John Wayne Gacy, Dr. Death, H.H. Holmes, Pedro Lopez, not sure about that one, and Eileen Wuornos. Today, I'm going to start off my version of Monsters with Lizzie Borden. I'm also going to give you the psychological profile of serial killers. I'm sure you've seen FBI. I'm sure you've seen Law and Order SVU. All those, they always profile the perp, the sus, They always have some kind of profile. Criminal Minds, they were the profilers. So the psychological profile of serial killers, they lack empathy. They have an inability to understand or relate to the feelings of others. They show no remorse. Grandiosity, a feeling of superiority, being above the law, and they outsmart authorities. They have thrill-seeking behavior. The excitement of the crime is a significant motivator for them. It's addictive, and then it escalates the crime. They have antisocial personality disorder. They frequently appear in the profiles of serial killers. Most Americans these days probably would be considered a serial killer because they're antisocial. Hello. But anywho, it shows a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others. So technically, just because you're antisocial doesn't mean that you're, it just means you don't feel like dealing with people at the moment. Understandable. There's a low frustration tolerance, a struggle with managing emotions, especially enforced with obstacles, and it can trigger violent reactions. Again, a good portion of the population have this right now. Doesn't necessarily mean you're a serial killer, but I guess if you combine all of it together, along with other issues, there's definitely disconnects with serial killers or serial rapists, etc. So today I will be starting off with Lizzie Borden. While I was in school for elementary education, I actually did a report on her. Could not find the report that I did. I scoured my laptop. I scoured my external hard drives. It's probably still on my old laptop downstairs in the basement somewhere. But I will be starting off with that. So yes, this episode I will be rambling on about Lizzie Borden. So we all know the nursery rhyme. Why it's a nursery rhyme, I don't know, because I would not be saying this to my child trying to get them to sleep or anything like that. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she had seen what she had done, she gave her father 41. Yes and no. And yes, that's my Miss Petunia in the background. You might be hearing them. And Frey is back there as well. So Lizzie was born in Fall River, Massachusetts in 1860. She was accused of murdering her stepmother and then her father. We all know the basic story that Lizzie and her maid Bridget were alone with Abby, Lizzie's stepmother, while Andrew was out conducting business. Andrew returns to the household and then takes a nap in the living room on the lounger. There was no weapon ever found. The timeline for the murders is that on August 4th, 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were murdered. On August 11th, 1892, Lizzie is arrested for the murders. June 5th, 1893, her trial begins in New Bedford, Massachusetts. On June 20th of 1893, Lizzie is found not guilty and acquitted. I do believe that would be the fastest murder trial ever. Okay. Lizzie's parents did not receive the 81 whacks as in that nursery rhyme. It was more like 18 for Abby and 10 for Andrew, totaling of 28. That is according to the coroner's report, which I did manage to dig up, as well as the Inquisition notes. And I will tell you, I was confused after reading those. No wonder. But yes, you can actually go on and like do a deep dive and find like the trial transcripts, all of that. It turns out that Lizzie was actually somewhat sedated for her inquisition. After finding her parents and going through all that trauma, her family doctor, Dr. Seabury Bowen, actually prescribed morphine to calm her down. So after reading the Inquisition, like I said, even I was confused. Of course, it doesn't really take that much, but still. They were trying to trip her up, and they couldn't really do it. Obviously, she was sedated, so she wasn't going to recall everything and make sense. I believe that if she wasn't doped up on the morphine at the time of her inquisition, she may have been more aware of what she was saying, and it may have made more sense versus being contradictory. I don't know. To me, the math just ain't mathin'. So you have the family doctor, Dr. Bowen, prescribing morphine to Lizzie to calm her down. Then she gets questioned, contradicts herself. Her neighbor, I believe it was Alice, recalls seeing Lizzie wearing a light blue dress with diamond print on it. Lizzie was seen disposing of a blue corduroy dress. I will still continue to ramble more about this because my thoughts were just all over the place. So let's take a look at some of the evidence. No sign of forced entry. The boarding house was locked from both the inside and out. We'll circle back to that later on. Nothing appears to have been stolen. Again, we'll circle back to that. No stranger was seen entering or leaving the residence because, there's always that one looky-loo nosy neighbor who knows the comings and goings of everyone in the neighborhood. Lizzie states that she heard no alarming noises while she was downstairs, yet Abby was struck several times and then fell over. And we all know back in that day, you could hear just about everything no matter where you were in the house. The day before the murders, Lizzie was seen at the drugstore trying to purchase prussic acid, which is also a poison. She stated she was using the prussic acid so that she could clean one of her sealskin capes. She obviously left empty-handed. The night before the murders, they all had dinner. They all weren't feeling that great. Lizzie stepped out for air, and she also went to her neighbor, Alice Russell, and confided in her that she feared one of her father's enemies was out to get them. It was going to eventually kill them pretty soon. And we will kind of circle back to that again a little later on. During her questioning, Lizzie made mention that while she was alone in the house with Abby, a messenger came with a letter for Abby asking to go see a sick friend. No such note was ever found. Upon returning inside from washing the windows, Bridget states that she heard muffled laughter coming from upstairs. Okay, so who was up there? Lizzie states she was in the living room. No, dining room, kitchen, dining room, kitchen. Went upstairs to sew something on her dress, then came back downstairs, did some ironing. She was all over the place. Again, that was in her inquisition, and it was tough. It was rough. At the time of Andrew's murder, Lizzie was supposed to be outside in the barn. In August, in the 1800s, clearly there's no AC. There's no fans. It probably was a bazillion degrees out in the barn. It's been, heating up all day, and then to be in the loft looking for lead sinkers for a fishing trip. Mind you, she had not been fishing in quite a long time. So that was her alibi, was that she was up there in the loft looking for lead sinkers for her fishing trip. The police went out to the barn. They obviously noticed it was like 1,000 degrees in there. They also saw no footprints in the barn. Dusty barn floor equals footprints if disturbed. Hi, Petunia. Petunia says hi. She wants to join. Lizzie's relationship with Abby was strained ever since Andrew gave property to Abby's sister. Andrew took property back from Emma and Lizzie. He then gave property to Abby's sisters. So both sisters, Abby and Emma, were a little bit upset with Mr. Andrew. Lizzie also kept insisting that Abby was not her mother, that she was a stepmother. Lizzie's biological mom, Sarah, passed away when she was little. And up until the time that Andrew gave Abby's sister the land, they were decent. They were okay as a mom and daughter. But after that, no. Lizzie had issues with her father. She was angry, to say the least, when Andrew ended up going out to the barn and killing the pigeons that were out there. Lizzie had built a roost for them. Andrew's thinking and reasoning for killing them was that they were attracting the neighborhood boys to come break into the barn and hunt them. And he didn't want Lizzie and Emma around boys. He did not let them date. So they ended up being spinsters. It's one thing to decide that on your own, but to have somebody else decide that, there was a family argument that led to both Emma and Lizzie leaving town and going into New Bedford. Upon returning back to Fall River, Lizzie actually stayed in a rooming house for a few days before returning to the Borden household. I'm pretty sure that the argument was regarding the land. Not 100%, but I think that's what it was regarding. It was also noted that Lizzie had been accused of shoplifting by several merchants, as well as being accused of stealing cash and jewelry from the boarding house, which led to the locks on the doors. So here we are circling back to the no forced entry. The house was locked up. Andrew Borden installed locks on doors within the house, like on the bedroom doors, so you could not enter their bedroom without a key. However, Abby was in the guest room, making up the guest room. But still, the means to get there, you still had to get into the house. The front door had locks on the inside and the outside, only accessible by certain keys. After the discovery of the bodies, Lizzie was sending anybody who came to help off to do errands. They are questioning why a woman who had just found her parents' bodies in their house would want to be left alone in the house when the killer would quite possibly still be nearby. Yeah. Okay. Alice Russell, Lizzie's neighbor, she reported watching Lizzie disposing of a blue corduroy dress. Lizzie explained that the dress had paint on it and that it was stained from the paint. So she chose to destroy the dress in the kitchen fire. Mind you, this said dress was never found by the police when they were searching the home. Hello? So, yeah, a lot of this stuff does not make sense. And again, this is all in the trial files, and the Lizzie Borden Historical Society has it all on online. The police found a bucket in the basement filled with water and bloody rags. Time error. The bloody rags in question were menstrual rags. So the police were told. So, taboo subject. You don't talk about that, like, ever, even back then. So they did not further question that bucket of bloody rags and water. At the time of Abby's murder, John Morse, who is Lizzie and Emma's uncle, brother of Sarah Morse, who was Lizzie's biological mom, he was visiting other relatives in town. Emma was out of town 2 hours away in Fairhaven. Andrew doing business errands. Bridget washing the windows. How did Bridget not see anybody coming and going in these windows? That leaves Lizzie alone in the house. Again, she states she was back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room, upstairs to mend some clothing, back down to the kitchen, dining room, and ironing. If an outsider was to commit these murders, they would have had to have entered the house at some point around the time Andrew was leaving. Maybe even quite possibly entering through the back door. But again, Bridget was outside and would have seen, and so would have Lizzie. And then they would have had to have hidden in the house, waiting. There is also a theory that Lizzie killed the Bordens stark naked. Hello? How? Timeline doesn't match, doesn't mesh, doesn't... The math ain't mathin'. We all know the 1800s, you had corsets, you had this, you had that. There was no way you were undressing, taking off all those layers, going in your stepmother, then going in your father, then washing your body clean of all the blood, all that matter, and then getting dressed in all those layers all by yourself. It ain't happening. My question is, how did she commit the murders? Undress, clean herself up, and get dressed again. How did she commit the murders completely stark naked? Again, you need to still clean your body so that, and then get redressed. So again, she either did it fully dressed, still had to undress, clean herself up, and then get dressed again. It ain't mathin'. There were a list of other suspects. Let's take a look at that. You've got Bridget Sullivan, the maid. She was washing the windows at the time of the murders. Did not see anybody enter the house. Did not see Lizzie go anywhere other than kitchen, dining room, etc. Lizzie corroborated Bridget's alibi. Bridget testified that all was well in the Borden household. Not so much. False. The only implication for Bridget were the bloody menstrual rags, and as previously stated, they weren't going to question those any further. There was a theory that Bridget and Lizzie were having a lesbian affair, and Abby found out. course, that was also taboo at the time. Maybe that's why they alibied each other. Food for thought. The second suspect on the list is Antonio Ariel, a disgruntled employee and Portuguese immigrant. Andrew Borden was well known for being a brutal businessman, not very compassionate with his employees. He was not very kind to his employees or to immigrants, period. So any one of his disgruntled employees could have been suspect. So along with Antonio, there could be a lot of others. Emma Borden, Lizzie's sister, though she was supposed to have been out of town, this was another popular theory outside of the Bridget and Lizzie theory. Emma was 12 when Sarah passed away. Emma promised Sarah she would take care of Lizzie. Andrew was overprotective, didn't let either of the girls date. Emma spent her entire childhood taking care of Lizzie. It's speculated that Emma, despite having the alibi of being out of town in Fairhaven, could have made the 2-hour ride home, murdered her parents to claim the Borden fortune. After the acquittal, Emma and Lizzie moved to Maplecroft. They sold 2nd Street and moved over to Maplecroft, where they lived quite a few years. Then Emma and Lizzie had a falling out, and Lizzie ended up staying there until she passed away. John V. Morse, Lizzie's uncle, Sarah's brother. John's alibi is very solid, so not quite sure how he got thrown in the mix. However, it does make sense that he could be upset that Andrew gave away Borden property instead of giving it to the girls. At 8:45, after having breakfast with the Bordens, John leaves for the post office. Then he goes to visit other relatives in the area. He takes the trolley, and he has it down to the minutes and the number of the trolley that he took. Airtight. Don't know. John's brother-in-law, George Fish, implied that John and Lizzie conspired to hire someone to do the murders. Valid. William Borden, an illegitimate son of Andrews. I have seen this come up a few times. There is letters, handwritten letters, which I will say I struggled to read. And granted, it was in cursive, fine, whatever. We learned how to read cursive. They no longer teach that. However, when handwriting is just bad, you can't read anything, period. But William Borden was the illegitimate son of Andrew. During Lizzie's inquest, the police alluded to Lizzie of other children. Lizzie admitted to the police that Andrew did have another child. Her name was Alice, and she was the older sibling of Emma and Lizzie, and she died when she was young. Another suspect was Jose Correa de Mello, the other axe murderer. On May 30th in 1893, a woman named Bertha Manchester was found brutally murdered by an axe. Jose wasn't even in America at the time of the Borden murders. He did do the 20 years for the Manchester murder. This next one, pretty far-fetched. Jack the Ripper. Yep. The world-famous United Kingdom, Britain, Jack the Ripper. A reader of the local paper in Fall River sent a letter to the paper days after the murders, suggesting the Borden murders resembled the murders of Jack the Ripper. It's speculated that the Fall River police even received a letter from Jack the Ripper himself confessing to the murders. Both of them. Andrew and Abby, and then Bertha Manchester. I don't know. Jack the Ripper? Come on. I don't know. I think maybe Bridget and Emma, John and William would be the more reasonable suspects. They had access to the house. Well, maybe not William, but John may have found out about William, could have conspired with Lizzie and even Emma. And if Bridget and Lizzie were, then maybe they all conspired together and alibied each other out. Possible? Can you tell I watch a little too much Law and Order? I can make it look like Santa Claus did it. So the question remains, if Lizzie didn't kill her parents, then who did? This will forever be the mystery. So, again, there's lots of theories floating around. We will never know the true answer, obviously. And if this happened in today's society where we have everything technological that we do, pretty sure it would be solved. Fingerprinting was available back then, but they didn't believe in it, is what I got out of the documentation. So they really didn't fingerprint. They couldn't even find the actual axe. So there was just a lot of theories, a lot of mystery to this one. Maybe someday it'll be solved, but I think this is going to be one of those cold cases, unfortunately. So on my next episode of Monsters, I will look into Ed Gein. And quite honestly, like, some of these, I don't know. Please don't hate me. Don't judge. Please just don't judge. That's all I need to say. Don't judge. So I will see you guys next time. Until then, blessed be.